So, in talking about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, the idea that there are people who are unaware that there is a different way of life, or there's a different world somewhere above them or out of reach, and they are kept in a cave and in the dark. Literally, in the dark there means they don't have information that would allow them to make different choices. All they are shown is the shadows on the wall that are sort of a shadow play, in a way, done by the people above who want to keep these people down below and not have them be aware that there's a different way of life. What really, the big takeaway there for me in relation to cinema, and what's the most important connector, because you could teach a whole class on that subject, but the biggest connector for me, where you got to start, is this idea of manipulation. Because cinema, regardless of how you feel about it emotionally, cinema is manipulative by its origin. You're not seeing motion. You're seeing the illusion of motion that is carried out by psychological, scientific processes, right, that allows that to happen. That's why the earliest filmmakers were oftentimes magicians or stage performers. It was illusory, the way that they would approach the craft. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to make that connection to the way propaganda has shaped the way we live in good and bad ways, but the way that you can manipulate mass audiences, either for entertainment purposes or for more questionable or lascivious purposes.
I think the camera has shaped the way that we see things and engage one another, the way that we deal with interpersonal relationships, and the way that we they do a great deal in terms of the cultivation of desire, making us want things or making us not want things, feel like things are repulsive. So I think that the camera, and as an extension, moving image, it has shaped the culture that we live in.
Most theorists suggest that the earliest forms of storytelling were primarily a way of maintaining sort of group identity, right? Recitations of a shared history, in a sense, like sort of often accompanied with rhythm and movement to help the storyteller remember sort of portions of the tale. Now, we can see in some societies there are places where there are live oral storytelling traditions, where there are sort of tales that are passed down. The story has moved beyond the historical reality of the character, and kind of takes on the shape of the society that now repeats it. But yeah, I think the basic purpose, the original purpose of storytelling, I think, does have to do with the kind of maintenance and creation of a shared group identity.
Yeah, people always want to feel connected. We are different in the ways that we want to feel connected, in the sense that not everybody has equal needs for connecting with other people. Some people, for example, are more introverted than others and may not want to have a wide circle of social contacts, but just rely on a smaller group of really close, trusted friends. But in general, people want to feel that they're part of something, or at least that there are people out there who understand them. And I think that when people don't feel like they are understood, or that there's nobody else out there who's like them or dealing with the things they're dealing with or likes the same things they like, that can be kind of an isolating experience. And most of us try to avoid those.
I think the community actually is a really important key component of the arts that I think we're often missing and that we often underestimate the importance of. Going to a theater performance for some reason seems to teach people empathy in a way that going to a movie does not. And, you go to a theater performance, there are live actors in front of you. You're surrounded, most likely by your neighbors. And, the same goes in that at least, is the same in a movie theater, right? You're largely surrounded by people who live near or around you. But for some reason, there's the dark room and the focus on a screen seems to narrow your level of engagement, right, to what's on the screen and not so much to what's around you. And I think that when we think about literature, for example, as just being something you sit and read by yourself, I think some of that happens as well, right? There's a danger in solipsism. There's a danger in thinking that art is a solitary experience. And I mean, I think that we need to get back to the idea of art as something that we share and that we experience with other people.
But obviously, the movie theater is very cave-like, right? I mean, you go in and the lights dim and it gets dark, and you're in there and you hear noises or you hear grunts or coughs or people, but you can't see them fully. Or right, it's dark, right? But you're all fixated on the light, the big screen, right? So there's a lot of primal connections, but there's also some deeper philosophical connections to how the mechanics of cinema work and connect as a style of storytelling within the communication universe. I mean, there's lots of different ways and mediums that you can choose to communicate with.
So video has become a medium that is not like marble or oil paint. It has a relationship to the public that makes it unique to our time.
In general, being exposed to art in any kind of way, whether you're participating in it or just, a consumer of art, allows you to kind of get an experience that may be a little different from your own. It kind of, I don't know, I hate to say broadens your horizons because we always talk about that, but it does. It exposes you to things you might not have thought about before, or it gives you things that you can connect with as well. You may watch a movie or read a poem or look at a painting and say, oh, this speaks to me in some way. This makes me feel like this person understands me, or I can see myself in this, or something like that. So it gives us a connection sometimes.
Can popular culture communicate important ideas? I think that's like a really great example of like the way that cinema can bridge that gap between important content and the ability to communicate that content to the masses.
My wife dragged me up to Atlanta to see Newsies a year or two ago, and I wanted to claw my eyes out. They're gonna see this hell today. Nothing can break us, no one can make us quit before we're done. There is some art that I think is probably just bad, but for whatever reason, that musical really resonates with preteen girls. I don't know why. I've never been a preteen girl, so I probably couldn't tell you or understand, but there's something in it that really captures them. And if that gets them thinking about, labor issues or, issues of wealth and power in society, even issues of homelessness, right? Then who am I to say that Newsies is a piece of shit, right?
If we look at it a little bit simpler, and we think about it in terms of, speaker, receiver, noise, and then all the sort of components that make a communication encounter work or not work, then the model is completely fantastic analogy to cinema in the way that it works, because you have a large group of people who've come together as a family, hopefully, to sort of put this story together and to be a player in the storytelling process. So if you're communicating things with an audience in a cinematic way, and I'm speaking specifically to that sort of medium of storytelling, it's critical, because those moments that you find that are real or special, or that all those adjectives that people use to talk about those scenes or those moments in cinema, those are captured from real experiences. And there's so many facets to the cinematic process, from the phases of production to all the different departments and artists and collaborators who work on it, they're all contributing some kind of component to the story. You ever play the game in elementary school where somebody starts a story and then somebody else has to like add a line or two, and then by the end of it you've got this sort of, Mad Lib or fragmented component that's a story, but it's not really a story. It's kind of got gaps and stuff like that. That's really just a writing game, but it teases out the process of putting together how to tell a story, right? So the big challenge after you do a Mad Lib or something like that is, well, how can we make that into a screenplay? Who would play that character and who would play this character? It's those parts of that process. They're all about communication.
With horror movies, all right, which is what I gravitate towards if I have to watch a movie. The one thing that's going to scare me is A, how likely is this to happen to me in real life, and B, the extent to which it sort of sticks with me after I go home, to the sense where am I nervous that this is going to happen to me after I go home. And so a movie like Jaws, for example, which is terrifying to watch as it's unfolding, to me is not that scary afterwards, because I am not worried that the shark is hiding in the closet when I go home. I'm not really scared about that. But something like Paranormal Activity, the first one, scared the pants off of me, because 90% of the scary stuff that happened in that movie occurred when the characters were lying in bed minding their own business, which is very frightening. Can you avoid getting eaten by a shark? Oh yeah, pretty easily actually. Don't go in the water. But can you avoid something terrible happening to you when you're lying in bed minding your own business? Not so much. So so that, but different people would have different opinions on that. Some people would say, well, I'm much more afraid of an actual creature than I am of a supernatural entity. And some people might be completely, think Paranormal Activity was stupid, but be utterly terrified by Jaws and not be able to stop thinking about that. So that's sort of a long-winded answer, but, we all have different things that scare us, different things that we enjoy, different things that we worry about or that we want to have happen to us or don't. And it's hard to predict exactly what that's going to be for people. I think that actually for filmmakers, it must be really hard to try to figure out exactly what's going to speak to people. I think that would be really challenging, because what makes sense to us doesn't make sense to other people necessarily.
Yeah, and if you look sort of across time, the themes that we see in narrative don't really change all that much. If you look, for example, at the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? What's the story primarily about? Friendship, fear of death, civilization building, responsible leadership. We still see a lot of those same kind of tropes, even in, say, like superhero movies. I just saw Black Panther about a week and a half ago, right? And, one of the big questions that movie asks is, like, what kind of society should Wakanda be, right? Much as, the ancient Babylonians were asking, like, what sort of society should we have, right? What kind of king should Gilgamesh be? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the same sorts of things that resonated with our ancestors still resonate with us. Just these kind of, broad human themes that, human life, for all of its increased technical sophistication, doesn't really change that much from decade to decade, from generation to generation. We're still worried about the same things.
You can say, I care about my audience, I value them, they're, the listeners, so I want to give them opportunities to connect or to identify with your storytelling technique, whether it's the way you've edited something or the way that you've written something or the way that you've costumed someone. You want it to be an opportunity for the audience to find a way to imaginatively identify with what it is that you're saying, and then they, in turn, then psychologically will make those connections and make them relevant to their personal life. This is why you have things like, I love this movie because of this character, because this character, I so relate to this character because it's just like my real life. that's the process that occurs, but that's because the director has said, I care about the audience and I want my story to find that audience, but also give others a chance to connect in some way, shape, or form. The flip side of that is you have a stance that is, I don't care about the audience, I'm making art. And it should be just an emotional sensory experience, and they're going to get what they're going to get. Audiences are unpredictable, so you can't try and formulate your whole game plan around what an audience is going to say or think or feel. You should just do it. And the process of storytelling, now related back into cinema, has always been a conflict between an expressionist style of storytelling. I don't care about the audience so much. I just want to tell the story in my way, and I'm going to be, artsy and expressionistic, and my cuts aren't going to always be logical and linear, And then you've got someone who says, "Man, I'm making a rom-com. It's going to make millions of dollars." Right? So it's the commercial, like film as a product versus film as art.
Often binaries are they take some of the gravity of things away, right? And many things exist in like an in-between sort of place. So I think in terms of like video or cinema, or like this is a video art piece and this is a film piece, and like which one is stronger, and it has to do with context.
Developmental psychologists as a whole tend to view life in a very continuous fashion, and there are lots of different elements that go into making up a person's life. And each of those things, each of those experiences that we have, each of those elements that goes on, kind of goes together towards contributing to the overall makeup of who we are. And that's where the puzzle sort of analogy comes in. But it's a really tricky puzzle because parts can sometimes get taken out or change. And it can't be interpreted as a literal puzzle, like a literal jigsaw puzzle, because it's one that you're constantly adding to, and you don't really know what it's all going to look like until it's done. You don't have a box to go on. You have an idea of what it might look like, but you don't really know.
Yeah, it's the essence, right? I mean, it's the lifeblood, because a film, a cinema itself, is simply a collection of moments edited together. So you're seeing it stitched. So it looks like a whole piece, but it's really just a collected whole of moments that were captured on set. So in essence, the relationships that we have are built in large extent on memory and experience, which we recall in a cinematic frame. We remember that moment at the bar, or we remember that wedding, or we remember that trip to Hawaii, or whatever, and we do it through photographs, through videos, through the retelling of events and things that happened. And we may not have pictures or videos for everything. We have our memories, and so it plays out in our heads like a movie. And so the things that we retain and the things that we remember are, in essence, the scenes that have been the cinematic moments where an epiphany's happened, or a turning point has occurred in your personal life, as it does in movies with characters as well.
It starts with the idea that's being communicated. So that has a great deal to do with what, in two-dimensional design, we call that the emphasis, right?
Robert Altman is famous for saying that it's all one movie to me. It's just different chapters, which is, in essence, claiming that all life is a movie. Everything is a scene, and we're all sort of actors playing about in this world, right? In this universe, and it's nothing really necessarily revolutionary. Shakespeare said it too. All the world's a stage, all that kind of stuff. But Altman was talking about it in a cinematic frame, so it's a little bit different because cinema is so connected to dreams. And dreams are fragmented. If you ever tried to recount your dream to someone, it's very difficult to connect certain parts, right? I mean, because there's things that you don't remember. And cinema works in the same way. You don't necessarily see every single action. Things cut away, they cut back. There's changing in time, all those kinds of things. So it's connected to dreams. So the significance of that is that the encounters that we have in daily life, the people that we know, the people that we work with, the people that we live with, the people that are our families, each of those encounters offers a sort of a cinematic moment for something to happen, something special. And if we're somehow conscious of those moments, then we might, somehow live a more examined life, a more joyful life, those kinds of things. We'll get the most out of it.